and I got blown up in an operation. It's kept my limbs and everything, but it was, definitely a close call. Got medevaced out of country and all that.
I like when guys just casually mention, they're like, oh yeah, I was there and I got blown up. And then you just skip over like so many like critical parts. Like, oh yeah, I got blown up. Whereas everybody listening to this is like, wait, what the fuck? Wait, go back. Hold on, go back.
Well, I'll give you the rundown. So we were, there was this town that was right near our base in Afghanistan.
If I didn't stop you, were you just going to continue on and be like, I got blown up, I started a nonprofit, and now I'm on YouTube. And great interview.
That's pretty much it.
Hey, Jonathan Kleck back with another episode of the Greencastle Podcast. Today we have on a guy that almost 1 million people follow on YouTube, Mr. B. Allen, a friend of ours, John Allen. He's a former Navy SEAL, got blown up in Afghanistan, which led him to ultimately start a nonprofit that he grew into a national nonprofit, and then ultimately continued in true entrepreneur form. He continued to pivot and reinvented himself, and now he's got almost 1 million subscribers on YouTube, putting out some great content, and he's got just a great, fascinating story about continuing to find himself in a position where he had to reinvent himself. He's super humble, and he's got a great story. You're going to like this one.
This individuality stuff is a bunch of crap.
There's a reason why.
A master of innovation.
The key to this growing is you.
Any rational person would give up.
I can't disagree with that.
Make sure that we're not prisoners of our own experiences.
You need a team of great people.
Will not tolerate a loser.
What they need is a common vision.
Helping organizations win one veteran at a time. This is the Greencastle Podcast.
Hey, John, thanks for joining us today, man. It's good to see you again, brother.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, so for, I mean, you have 750,000 followers on YouTube, but correct me if I'm wrong, just not even 2 years ago, you weren't even doing YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, no, 2 years ago, I was just out of the military. Really, I had no social presence whatsoever. So this is definitely a new thing.
Yeah. So I want to walk through your story because people like you have 750,000 subscribers on YouTube. And that has only happened in the last, few months or last year. But you have been an entrepreneur and you've had a hell of a journey. And I don't know if people actually know the guy behind Mr. B. Allen on YouTube, or like your whole story about just where you came from and growing up in the SEAL teams, and your story about how you ended up getting out of the Navy and coming into and starting a nonprofit. And so let's go back. Well, first of all, you're now doing your history stories on YouTube. Take us through a little bit about how you ended up there, because I think your story is fascinating about just how you've sort of bounced and you've continued to reinvent yourself. And that's why I was pretty excited to have you on. I think you are a great story about resilience, and then just continuing to be like, all right, screw it. It's, you know what, I'm going to reinvent myself with this, and look where you are now, man.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for the flattering comments. Yeah, it's been a strange couple of years here, mostly positive. I was I grew up in Boston, and I went to college first. I was kind of a screw up and barely made it through college. And I remember I was about halfway through when I started to think like, man, I've really squandered a lot of opportunities in my life. And I was thinking about the military a little bit. I definitely wasn't thinking about the SEAL teams. It was more like a bunch of my friends had joined the Marine Corps and gone off to Iraq and Afghanistan, because I was in high school in 2002 to 2006. So like everyone was going overseas. And I kind of just idolized those guys. So I started looking at the military, and it just so happened that my mom, her best friend, who was kind of like a family friend, her two brothers, who I'm sure you know, I'm not going to name drop them, but her two brothers were retired. They were retiring Navy SEALs. And my mom was like, oh, if you're thinking about joining the military, why don't you go talk to them and like learn about, the Navy SEAL teams. I'm like, Mom, there's a huge difference between just joining the Navy or joining the military and becoming a SEAL. But I was like, all right. And so I went and met with these guys up in New Hampshire, and I was just blown away, not because they were putting on some show. In fact, they were kind of doing the opposite. They were literally like the most nonchalant, like not trying to be impressive, just gave me a hard time the entire time I was there.
Yeah.
There was nothing I could say that wouldn't be made fun of. But
I want to be part of these guys.
Yeah, I was like, that's awesome.
Nothing entices you to join it like people just raking you across the coals the whole time.
Oh man, yeah. So I walked away from that weekend like totally inspired, and I'm like, man, I want to be just like those guys. And so I just became obsessed with the SEAL teams, like completely, like consuming every book, watching every show, like doing everything I can to learn about it. And after I graduated college, I enlisted and joined the Navy. And I remember I was telling my family, like, yeah, I think I'm going to go to law school. And I even made up my LSAT scores. I'd never even taken the LSAT. And I like made up some number. I was like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I got like 300 on my LSATs. And then I graduated, and literally the same week I graduated from college. So I got my bachelor's degree. I was in the enlisted recruiter's office, like signing papers to go to join the Navy. And my family was pretty shocked that that's what I did. But, I got through training, which was cool. I was a terrible Bud student, man. I got rolled twice. I barely got through, you know what I mean? Got through and became a SEAL. Went to a team, and on my first deployment, I went to Afghanistan with Team 2. And I got blown up in an operation. It's kept my limbs and everything, but it was, definitely a close call. Got medevaced out of country and all that.
I like when guys just casually mention, they're like, oh yeah, I was there and I got blown up. And then you just skip over like so many like critical parts. Like, oh yeah, I got blown up. Whereas everybody listening to this is like, wait, what the fuck? Wait, go back. Hold on, go back.
Well, I'll give you the rundown. So we were, there was this town that was right near our base in Afghanistan.
If I didn't stop you, were you just going to continue on and be like, I got blown up, I started a nonprofit, and now I'm on YouTube. And great interview.
That's pretty much it. So we were stationed in this area in Afghanistan where basically across the road there was like there was like one paved road in Afghanistan, so Route Utah. We were on one side of the road, and on the other side was this like bad guy town, for lack of a better description. And we regularly went in there. It was just that was the place we went in because there was always something happening in there. And we'd been going in there for like 5 months, and every time we went in there, we would just get shot at. It was like they'd see us coming. There was no way to show up without giving away your position. And so we went in one day.
You had been going in there every month or every day for 5 months. So they kind of were like, hey, I think the Americans want to come fight.
Yeah, pretty much. And so this one day we go in, it was just like this weird day where it was broad daylight, and we get into this, it's like the section of the town, which was walled in. So we were kind of like hidden. And we ended up putting ourselves in a position where we got out and we moved into like the side of the town, and there was all these fighters in the second floor of these buildings, but they weren't engaging us. They were just watching us. And we kind of put ourselves in this very perilous situation where we had moved up far enough away from the vehicles where back to them, we would be exposed to these guys in the second floor that we didn't see until we got up to this wall. And so we're like at the standstill where we're kind of like hoping they shoot us so we can open up our rules of engagement so we can like shoot back, because we can't until they start shooting at us. And so for like 40.
Did anybody take like a helmet and put it like on a broomstick?
Yeah,
see if it can get shot at?
Us. And so we were like laying down behind this wall, and we're like, fuck, like what do we do? And finally the decision was made, like if we go back, there's a good chance one of us gets shot. And it's so stupid to like, all right, we're just gonna walk backwards with our back to the enemy. And so we're like, all right, we're gonna assault through. And so we walked into the courtyard. There was like the worst place you could go. There was nowhere else we could go. We had to walk straight into this courtyard. It's all on body cam too, and it's eerie footage. We walk into this courtyard and it's like quiet, but what you don't see in the video is like lining the walls in the second floor are fighters that we know are there. And so we're just like walking in, getting ready to get shot at, and then they opened up on us. And in the first volley of fire, this sounds horrible, but no Americans got shot. Some of our partner force did, and they were okay. Everybody lived. But in the initial volley, all the SEALs were okay. And so we took to the buildings, and it turned into this like pretty long gunfight. Our dog got shot too, but our dog survived. And so we're like fighting like rooftop to rooftop, and it's fairly close combat. It was like kind of of the whole time I was there, this was by far the most intense thing I was a part of, except for what happens about a couple hours after this. And so we have this like all day long kind of like, you know how it is. It's not like we're literally engaging the enemy for like 6 hours, but it was like sporadic for about 6 hours. And then like by the evening time, the fighting had kind of just stopped abruptly. It was dark out, and it was like everybody had just disappeared. And it was like very anticlimactic, you know, because we're in the middle of this like Rambo-esque gunfight all day, and then like suddenly everyone's gone, and we kind of got our ass kicked. We had like 5 medevaced going out, and we're like, damn, like now what do we do? And as we're getting ready to leave, one of our drones overhead picks up a group of what looks like fighters, but we don't know who they are. And they're like, hey, there's a group of, you know, military-age males that are kind of clustered near the exit where you guys are going. And at this point, we'd all, you know, the SEAL platoon had broken into different fire teams. And so my fire team, which is, for those listening, it's just a small group of guys. There was like 6 of us. We were closest to this group. And so we're like, okay, well, we're just going to go see who they are. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to walk over and take a look at this group and see if they really are fighters. And we walk down this alleyway, and we get to this wall where the intel we were being fed was we would be able to get to this wall, poke our heads over it, and look out across this field and see this group from a safe distance behind a wall.
Yes.
And so we walk down this alleyway, and we're like, this is going to be great. We're going to get this great intel. And we like realize right when we get to the wall that on the immediate other side of the wall, not across the field, but like a foot away from us, are the fighters. And all of us, we've made no noise going down this alleyway. We're like surprisingly quiet. We're looking at each other, and even under nods, night vision, it was clear that all of us are looking at each other like, what have we done? We are literally in the hornet's nest. And so we had to just be proactive. And so one guy stood over the wall, starts engaging them. They were holding grenades. So we also looked first, and we saw they had guns. They were holding grenades.
Just to be clear, for anybody listening, engaging him is not conversation. Like, hey guys, drop your weapons. No, engaging him meaning you're bad guys. Yeah, it's one of us is walking away from this, and one of us is not.
Yeah, that's it. So we start shooting, and they were holding grenades for like this scenario. This is the scenario they were preparing for, is if the idiots come up to us, we're going to have grenades. We're going to throw down their throats. And so here we are. And so grenades come over the wall. And I remember I was like, it was so crazy. The grenade comes over the wall, and it hits my shoulder and lands in the ground between all of us. This is like a kill shot. And I remember as the grenade came over the wall, we were standing in the infrared spotlight from the drone overhead, but it was like the targeting one. It was like flashing. And so it's this crazy scenario where there's like gunfire like right in front of us. It's like super intimate gunfire. And a grenade is just coming right over the fence towards me, the wall. And I'm watching it hit my shoulder, and I'm like, well, that's the end for me. and like time really slowed down, because like I really was expecting to get my head literally blown off. But it kept falling to the ground. And I remember as it traveled, this is happening in a fraction of a second, but as it was traveling to the ground, I remember it reached my midsection, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get killed, but at least my head will still be intact, and my family can recognize me. And then it kept going down, and it made it to my legs. I'm like, oh shit, I might live through this. I'm going to blow my legs off, but I might live. And then it hit the ground, and it's like, whoa, I might live. And it felt like someone took a whole bunch of rocks and just like threw them at my leg and my back. And my conception of time after the detonation is it's a mess. I thought for the longest time that like it blew up, but I was totally conscious and like began to move to get to cover. But in reality, I got completely annihilated, like went straight on the ground. And I was unconscious, and a couple other guys were down too. But our medic, who I'm sure you know him too, but our medic, he was like the only guy that wasn't concussed from the 2 grenades that came over the wall. And so imagine this scene for the medic, okay? Everyone's fucking down. And there's literally, the enemy is on the immediate other side of this wall, and they're just spraying like AK-47s over the wall. And the rest of the city, there was all these fighters in other parts of the town who began just like firing rockets generally in our direction. They don't give a shit if they hit their own guys. Just firing rockets towards us. And so our one medic, he's like looking down this tiny little alleyway, and it's like hell. And he said he went into this like state of like flow, and he was like, I just knew what I had to do. And he began going guy to guy doing needle decompressions and just everything he had to do. And he told me, this totally freaked me out years later when I talked to him. He was like, dude, I saw you on the ground, and I told, like, in terms of triage, I was like, you're dead. And I moved on to the next guy because you were face down and you just weren't moving. And he was like, I had to go to the other guys first.
I like your memory of it better, where you were like Rambo and you like ran away and like you picked up some buddies on their way out.
Yeah. Instead, I was just laying there. But he said after he got a bunch of guys out, he said he came back and he saw that, like, I don't even know what he saw that triggered that maybe I was okay. But either way, he came over to me and he dragged me to not even cover, but concealment. So bullets can't, so cover, concealment, cover, bullets will stop. Concealment, you're just hidden. And he kind of moved me out of the way. And he was like, as he moved me, I kind of came to, and I was all screwed up. And he's like, John, you got to put tourniquets on your legs. I have to go down and get somebody else. And I'm like, okay. And I was too weak to literally break the rubber bands that hold your tourniquets on your kit. Yeah. And so I'm sitting against this wall, and I'm alive, obviously. And I remember my vision, like, went to, like toilet paper rolls.
Yeah.
I went deaf. And then I actually went blind, and I can't get my tourniquets off. And I was like, well, now I'm dying. Like that, it wasn't even sad. It was more like, this is a fact that, like, I am currently in the state of dying. This is what it feels like. I know I'm bleeding to death. Yeah. And
I actually want to stop for a second, because I think it's fascinating at how the clarity you have of going through the stages of, I'm going to have my head popped off like a, I don't know, like something that has a head popped off. I don't know. Right. And then you're like, oh, okay, now it's at my midsection. So I'm about to lose my junk, but I might live. But my head will be intact. And then it's like, oh, now it's at my legs. I think it's fascinating, because this isn't a matter of milliseconds. And yet you remember your brain processing these very distinct, separate thoughts. I'm going to lose my head. Okay, my head will be intact. I'm still going to die. Okay, now I might live, but my legs are going to be blown off. Holy shit, it's on the ground. I might actually live. I think that's a fascinating look at just like how the neural receptors just work, without geeking out on that shit. But it's crazy, right?
Yeah. It's weird, because I look back at it and I know it happened in a matter of a second. I mean, it's how long does it take for a rock to fall from your head to the ground?
Yeah.
Like a second.
Yeah, right.
Not even. And it's true. It's not something that my brain concocted after the fact. It was like, when you're gonna die, or when you're gonna experience something super traumatic, and it's like, I would imagine if you like walked into the street and a car was blazing towards you and there's no way to get out of the way, it's probably similar. Those people who die after getting hit by those cars, they do think of something before they're hit. There are thoughts that you process. And I think when your body knows something really fucking bad is going to happen to you, it like fires off all sorts of chemicals into your body to like prepare yourself for this horrible thing. And it gives the illusion, because you're thinking about it so much and so intently, it gives the illusion of time being slower than it really is. And I remember that grenade really in those stages. It was like the longest, to me, few seconds. It was probably a fraction of a second, but that's how I remember it. But I'm up against this wall. I go blind, I go deaf. And then I was like, so that's the end. That's it. I remember I thought about my wife, who's back home in Virginia. I remember I was like really frustrated that I didn't have a family with her yet. We put off having kids to get through one deployment, and then I remember it was like the feeling I had was of letting go. That's the only way I can describe the physical feeling I had. But I knew I was dying. And I was like, all right, that's it. And I kind of let go. And I remember hitting the ground next to me and feeling the ground. And then that was it. That's all I remember. And then my medic had run back over, saw me slouched over. He immediately starts trying to find the bleed, and he puts tourniquets on. And then I kind of come back to, and he's laying over me, like using his body as like a human shield, as like we're getting shot at down the alleyway. And he's so calm. He's looking me in the face. He's like, hey, John, how's it going? Got your tourniquets on, like in the middle of this gunfight. Hey, how's it going? Get your tourniquets on. I think you're going to be okay. The bleeding stopped. He was like, can you stand up on your own? And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, you're going to be fine. Like literally bullets flying overhead. And literally they hoisted me up. And then another guy we called in, I'm pretty sure I don't know if this is definitely true, but I'm pretty sure we called in a danger close airstrike. So the danger close, for those that what this is, but it's like, if you have to call an airstrike in on yourself, more or less, because you're in such a dire situation that you're like, hey, we have to drop on ourselves. Otherwise, we're dead anyways. I'm almost positive we did, because the Hellfire missile struck like 6 feet away from us on the other side of this wall and luckily hit the guys that we've been fighting with.
Which is a separate story about how accurate munitions can be today. The fact that you said they're literally like 18 inches on the other side of this wall from us, and yet a Hellfire missile. And kudos to those guys up in the air who are able to discern who the good guys, who the bad guys are. You're like, we're on the good side of the wall. They're like, which side is that? All I see is bullets flying on either side of the wall. And then kudos to the guys in the sky who can discern that and then make sure that missile gets on the right side of the wall.
Yeah, that was a ballsy drop. So that was great. And then they couldn't get a helo to come in to get us because we were in the middle of this very urban section of town, and so we had to run like 800 meters to a hot extract. And I couldn't move. I could stand, but my legs were like pillars, I couldn't move them. And so my medic and another guy are like running, holding me, and we're just like running literally through a street. Like, we haven't cleared anything. No, and like there's no help. We're just running through this town where rockets are just being fired arbitrarily in our direction. And we get to the helo and they throw us in the helo. And then our other guys, they couldn't fit on the helo. So they had to stay there and like fight their way back to the other guys, but they were fine. But yeah, then I got medevaced. And then actually there's another weird part to the story. They didn't know how bad, by they, I mean the other team guys that were in Afghanistan that were at the first base that me and the other guy I was with were getting medevaced to. They had seen that a couple team guys had gotten hurt and they were getting medevaced, that it was gunshot wound, whatever it was. And they didn't know the severity of the injuries. They had no idea if it was nothing or if it was going to be really bad. And so a bunch of the team guys went into the medical tent and like put on their best uniform, which was like shitty camo, but it was the best one they could find. And they were there to meet us in case we died. And so we went into the tent. And like, I remember looking around, it was like the weirdest scene. You have all these doctors like with their gloves on, like waiting to do intense surgery to us. And then on the side of the tent is like 20 team guys that have like the most intense face on because they don't know what they're going to see. Is it going to be 2 dead guys coming in or, and it dawned on me when I first got in there, like, oh, this is great. My buddies are here. I was like joking, like, look at mine. I was naked from the waist down. I was like, look. And I was like making jokes as I go in. And then I was like, oh shit, like this is like where people die too. And like, they don't know if I'm going to live or die. And then I'm like, wait, am I going to die? I feel pretty stable now. Yeah. But they wheeled us in and I got put under right away. And they just had to pull some shrapnel out. I was lucky enough that I didn't have what they call it. You don't have to beep this out, but so anal breaching. I was lucky enough to not have that because if the shrapnel had gone in and like punctured that part of me, it would have almost definitely led to a massive infection and I would have died. And so they were like, you were this close. You were like this close to being unrecoverable. But yeah, so we lived. That was pretty crazy. And yeah, when I got back, so I got back from Afghanistan early. My platoon stayed out for another month. But when I got back, I was like, I was having like not second thoughts about the teams, but it was like I had seen up close the fragility of life, and I had seen up close how what this job really looks like. And it wasn't like the sexiness was gone or something, but it was more like, I don't know if I can do this for 20 years. Like I really don't know if I can actually make that decision. It was like I was having an existential crisis of like, is this really what I want to do? And I felt bad for kind of being like, man, this is really dangerous. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But I kind of decided that I would do another deployment and then figure it out. So I got through rehab and all that. And then I did another deployment to South America. So no combat or anything. Yeah. But at the end of it, I was like, yeah, I can't do this. I got to get out. I have family, kids coming in. And so I got ready to get out. And there was a screw up with my paperwork. And it's much more complicated than this, but it boiled down to I was planning on getting out of the military on April of 2017. And I go into the office in, December of 2017. That's it. That was my anticipated exit date, December 2017. And I go into the office in January of 2017. At this time, I'm back stateside doing training and stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, I got a year to go here. It was actually, I think it was more than a year. But either way, I had all this runway. And I go in and they're like, okay, so you're getting ready to get out. Let me just check your end of service date. And like, oh, it looks like it's April of 2017. And I'm like, oh no, that's in 3 months. That's not right. And they're like, nope, that's your date. That's when you're getting out. And it turned out the gist of it was I couldn't change my date without re-enlisting. And I wasn't prepared to re-enlist. And so instead of having over a year to prepare my exit from the military, I had 3 months. And I didn't have anything planned. I was planning on going to business school and using that as my transition, but there wasn't enough time for it. And then I'm going to gloss through another big moment here. But I basically ended up connecting with a former investment banker named Jordan Selleck, who's out in New York. And we put together this event, which you attended, I'm pretty sure, the first ever.
Yep, that May of 17.
Yeah, that's right. And so we put together this networking event where a bunch of operators, team guys and stuff would go into New York and meet with professionals. And my intention was not to build a company. My intention was to have an event where I would get a job and help my friends in the process. But it was effective enough and it was successful enough. And there were people willing to give more money to it that ironically, no one offered me a job at this event because the assumption was my job was running these events and then that would become my job. And so over the next...
The irony is not lost on me, by the way. Yeah. Like,
yeah. So
I'd like here for a job. No, here, you're running the organization. No. Like, guys, like I'm literally selfishly, I'm here to get employed.
Oh, yeah. And I could have made that more clear to the people I was talking to, but they just didn't get it. So, but yeah, we ended up, I got out. I actually ended up getting medically retired, which was a hookup for me because it gave me a few more months of pay from the Navy as I'm trying to stand up Elite Meat. That's the name of the event company, the charity company. So I got medically retired and I did Elite Meat for a couple of years. And then I can stop here because I've been rambling now for like 15 minutes, but
no, it's good. It's good, man. This is great. It's actually like for all the years I've known you, I actually did not know the story of how you got blowed up. And I'm always fascinated. I kind of geek out on how the brain and how we process things under stress. And I think so. I just the story about you and all of the things you remember and how time slowed down and the tunnel vision and the auditory exclusion. Really, I think those are just fascinating things by themselves. But the fact that you sort of fell into Elite Meat by accident, but that and so for anybody who's listening, Elite Meat is a nonprofit organization that puts special operations and pilots, but special operations veterans and pilots in front of hiring folks that are looking for really high caliber performers who might not have an MBA but have shown this great ability to perform at a high level and to work with very high performance organizations, and that's actually how you and I met through that. But before we even go into like how you got to where you are today, just the fact that Elite Meat, and you and I have talked a little bit about this before, but the fact that it was just sort of fell in your lap, and you had never run. Correct me if I'm wrong. You'd never run a nonprofit. You'd never started a nonprofit. You were never a CEO of a nationwide organization, and it just fell in your lap with when Jordan hooked up with you and said, "Hey, do you want to let's put people who want good qualified people in front of those good qualified people. And let's just see what happens."
Yeah.
So kind of talk us through a little bit about because it's really a fascinating thing for entrepreneurs or people in leadership positions, how Elite Meat sort of came about and how you made the decision, like, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing, and then what you did and some of the challenges in that.
Yeah. So I think that the hardest thing I'm speaking in my very limited experience, but I think the hardest thing for starting any business, whether it's a charity or a for-profit, is you really need to focus on bringing money into your organization. Because if you're not bringing in money, you might have the best product, you might have the sexiest looking website, but if you don't have a way to generate revenue, your business can't last. Even if you have investment capital, like you need to make sales. And in the nonprofit world, you're pretty much permanently in the sales cycle, because as soon as you get someone to donate, like you're pretty much immediately getting them to give you more money later. And so you're perpetually asking for more money. There isn't a time where you stop because there is no recurring revenue. I mean, to a degree there is, but not really. This is not a subscription. It's like you need people to be excited about what you're doing and what effects they're having. And at the higher levels of giving, even though there is no sale happening, they aren't being given something. You're kidding yourself if you don't think that they're going to get extra attention because they're giving it a much higher level. And so the thing that I really struggled with up front was learning how to raise money consistently and how to foster those relationships so that the people that were giving money would continue to give more money. And it is so ungodly stressful to be the fundraiser of an organization, because like if you want to build your team and build a bigger charity, you need more money. And in order to raise more money, like you got to put more time into making more calls. And I remember like a couple months into Elite Meet where, so we have this event in New York, this inaugural event where, you know, it wasn't going to be a company. It wasn't going to be anything. It was like, I'm going to get a job.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out. And I was actually quite frustrated that no one got me a job. And a couple other guys did get hired. I'm like, man, that's some BS, you know? And, but afterwards, some of our sponsors, like including the Navy SEAL Foundation, who had given us money for this first event, they were like, man, we've heard such positive things about this. Would you guys consider doing another one? And truthfully, Jordan and I had not considered doing another one. It was like, we're doing this event. That's what we're going to do. And when people, including the Navy SEAL Foundation and a few others, were like, hey, we give money to do another one of these things, it was like, oh, well, maybe there's legs here. Maybe we can do this again. And the second event was really easy to do because we were basically doing the event because people said, here, take our money and do another one. And it was easy. But then once you get into like, okay, what we're going to do is do these a couple times a year, 3-4 times a year, like suddenly you need to be the one getting people to give you money. And that's where I really, really struggled. Initially, it was so easy. Oh, it's a great idea, John. Oh, my goodness. What you're doing is so cool. Oh, my goodness. This is great. Here, take our money. Take my credit card. And then it was like, okay, this is a real organization now. Like, I'm going to start approaching people to do this stuff. And all of a sudden, it was like I felt totally ill-equipped to understand how to ask people for money or at what level you ask for money. And I went into a shell. That first year, I was so bad at fundraising. It was like I would take like one sales call or, you know, sponsor call a week. And whether it was a yes or a no, it was like so stressful. I had to like take the rest of the week off. And like, I couldn't do that. And so I remember by the end of 2017, we had done 2 events in New York, and then we had barely been able to put together one in San Francisco that August. And this was around the time that we had really gone from being, hey, this is a cool idea, to like we had put in our paperwork, we were a 501c3. I had just been medically retired. Like, this is my job now. And I remember we were out in San Francisco for this event, and it was the first time that we were the ones, the organization that had really have this event. We had gone out and pulled in sponsors, and we had like brought everyone to San Francisco. Were you at this event by any chance? I don't think you were.
Not in San Fran, no.
So at the end of the last night, we had a dinner. We had a dinner at this restaurant, and it's like the closing night, and like I'm just the CEO of this organization, and there's all these people there. And I said I wanted to give closing remarks. I wanted to like go up and say thank you to the people that are here. And then this restaurant is this beautiful restaurant, and there's this like perfect space to have all these people here. Probably at least 100 people there. And over the course of the night, there was like an hour and a half that I was just mingling before I was going to give my big closing remarks. And it was like everybody was coming up to me and be like, man, what an amazing organization you're building. Like, yeah, you're doing such a good job as a young CEO. Like, this is so great. Like, everyone's like, oh my God, you're so awesome. This is just so great. And like, I was starting to feel really stressed out that this was way more serious than I thought I realized. Like, holy cow, like, there's a lot of people that think this is a big deal. And I started to feel like a fraud, like that secretly I'm terrible at what I'm doing. And I went up to give my closing remarks. And I had this microphone in my hand. I walk up to the middle of the room. And the way it was situated is there's people on my right, my left, and in front of me. So I'm like surrounded. I'm like in the middle of this I don't know, table or whatever. And I froze. In the most epic way. I'm pretty good at public speaking, but it was like the pressure of the moment suddenly just completely blew up. And I looked around the room at all these people that had given us thousands of dollars, and all these veterans, like, wow, this guy's so great. All the hiring partners there, like, man, this guy's really doing something great here. And I'm standing in the middle of the room, like, what am I doing here? And I remember all I could get out was, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Jordan now. It was like the most pathetic remark. And anyways, Jordan did fine. He was like, all right, man. But it was like, that was the moment that I was like, dang, like I need to approach this and take ownership of what we're doing. Stop acting like this is just some fun little thing I'm doing. Like, I need to be a CEO. I need to stop, waiting around and hoping things work out. And I remember after that event is when I was like, okay, I need to take fundraising way more seriously. I need to get a team involved. I need to start like professionalizing the organization.
Yeah.
And so following that event was 2018. And that's when we, for the first time ever, raised money on a really consistent basis, which was huge. Having some runway is so important. And it just meant I was taking more calls. That was it. Like, you want to make more money? Ask more times. Like, that's pretty much what it boils down to. And we raised a lot of money and we became a real organization. And I think that ultimately that talk I gave in San Francisco, that was the moment where I went from being scared of running an organization to like, I run the organization. Like, I am the face of the organization, and like, I need to own that spot, even if I don't know what I'm doing.
So there's like a mental, which is interesting because the imposter syndrome is real. And I think people have this vision that, that guys like, SEALs and just other, high caliber athletes and CEOs, that everybody feels comfortable and confident, and gals too. Like, everybody's confident in all these, the entrepreneurs that start the next Uber and that kind of stuff. Like, they're all super confident. And the reality is when you talk to any of them, when you really get into an authentic conversation and they show some vulnerability, they're like, oh, the imposter syndrome's real. Like, I had never started Uber. I had never started whatever the next big tech company, or I'd never started a nonprofit. And I suffered from a little bit of an imposter syndrome. Like, do they all know I'm a fraud, that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm figuring it out as I go? And I think there's an interesting story there that not everybody has a chance to do, which is to have that seminal moment where they go, hey, I may not know what I'm doing, but I better figure it the hell out, because everyone else here is expecting me to lead, and to actually be a real leader. I think that's a fascinating part of that story that not everybody has a chance to do.
Yeah, no, that was it. And following that basically 2018 and onward, we still have made payroll every month. We haven't missed payroll, which is a really big deal when you're a small little charity. And actually, I transitioned out of Elite Meat just a few months ago. So I guess we can shift focus to what I'm doing now. I don't know if this is a good time for that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's no structure to this podcast, man. we just go with the flow.
So one of the things I was doing as the CEO of Elite Meat is I was leveraging really LinkedIn and Instagram to a degree. I was creating content to kind of generate buzz around, special operations and trying to get people interested and then funneling them to Elite Meat. But what happened over time is I got really good at creating content around my own experience. And I went from creating content that was really like, look at Elite Meat, to look at this guy. And I totally went the path of like, I'm Mr. Navy SEAL on social media. And it turned into like, I was posting all the time on Instagram. Like, I was like playing the Mr. Humble card, but I knew what I was doing. I was creating content around being Mr. SEAL. And, I started getting a lot of negative feedback from the community, which I fully understand. I'm from the community. There's a huge taboo around really aggressive self-promotion, in particular around self-promotion with the Trident. And I was very guilty of this. And to the outside world, they're like, well, you can talk about that. Like, you earned that. But the way
they were eating it up, right? That's why they were eating it up. Yeah.
Right. And so, but from the community's perspective, it's like the Trident isn't owned by any one individual. And frankly, like the legacy of the SEAL teams has been built on people that have died building it. And so it's like this horrible, betrayal to start leveraging the Trident as your own, even if you don't necessarily mean to. It's a big, you can't do that. And so I was at this moment of my life.
And the unfortunate thing, I think, is that there have been people who have shamelessly promoted Just Space that have not been blown up, or that have done very little in the world. And we all know who those guys are. And within the community, it's funny because we are probably the worst at eating our own. And we really do, just rake our own guys across the coals. Even if you tiptoe into into the realm of using the Trident, or using your status as a team guy to build upon, and to go out and parlay that into a career. We have a very little tolerance for guys doing it, even though collectively we all say, well, we'll give you a little bit of leeway. The Jockos of the world. I mean, Jocko has built this name brand based on being a team guy, and for whatever reason, the community gives him a lot of leeway. Yeah. But other guys that maybe have done so in a less classy way, they and whatever that, there's this nebulous line that we draw in the sand and go, well,
It's
Jocko
true.
can do it, but you can't because
Yeah.
we don't like the way you did it. So we are probably the worst at criticizing our own.
Yeah, it was. And I hate to play the victim here because I know what I was getting myself into. And so, you know what I mean? But like, my God, it is something else when you're on the receiving end of the community deciding that you've crossed this line.
Yeah.
And part of me like knew I had. Oh, and it wasn't like there was one time this happened. This was over the course of probably 6 months to a year, where I went from like LinkedIn marketing to Instagram, and I built up a pretty decent sized Instagram page, but it was predicated on me, the Navy SEAL. And I started getting just some of the most heart-wrenching messages from people that were like disowning me. And again, like I have no ill will and I have no issues with that. I get why it happened. But I had another kind of like turning point in my life where I was getting ready to potentially leave Elite Meat, just because that was something I wanted to do, to transition out, give somebody else a chance to lead it. And I'm like, am I really going to be the guy that is like, 20 years from now saying, when I was in bunts, this is what happened? Like, am I really going to do that? And I remember I moved to Pennsylvania, and I remember I put a post out on Instagram that was like a typical like team guy post or whatever, like, I'm Mr. Navy SEAL. And as soon as I posted it, I'm like, I hate this. I can never do this again. It's not worth it. I don't want to do this thing. And I was like, but I've seen the power of social media. I mean, frankly, through social media, we've raised literally millions of dollars for an organization, and I'm just getting good at it. And it was like, damn, like I wish I had something I could do that was powerful, that was on the internet, that I could leverage the things that I've learned, but it wasn't the I'm Mr. Navy SEAL. And it just so happened that there was this new like kids social media app called TikTok that was coming online, and I saw it as an opportunity to try some new content on this platform. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I did a couple like really cringy like humor skits that were not funny, and they were just cringy. And then I posted a story that is like it has nothing to do with me as a SEAL. And no part of the post has to do with me being a SEAL. It was about these Russian hikers back in the 1950s that went into the Ural Mountains back when it was the Soviet Union. And they go out on this hike, and they're super experienced. They're going out to complete their level 3 hiker certification, which is apparently at the time a really big deal. And it means you're already super qualified.
Yeah.
And they go out to the mountains.
Qualified in hiking.
Super qualified in hiking.
Which is walking.
And
I just lost any followers that are like super hikers, just so they're like, I'm not listening to this guy again. He just denigrated our whole industry.
Yeah, there you go.
You're really qualified at hiking.
So they were really good at walking. And they had a diary they were keeping, and every day they were out. They were planning on doing this like 18-day journey, and this is 1950, so they had planned their route so that people would meet them at different points. And when they missed a rendezvous point, like people started getting concerned, but everybody was like, well, they're super experienced. I'm sure they'll figure it out. And then like a couple of weeks go by and no one showed up, and so they sent a search party out, and they find their campsite, and this campsite has been just decimated. It looks like a creature or an animal has just ransacked this area. But they started discovering all these totally bizarre things about the campsite. They found their diary, and everything was like going great. Everything's like so awesome. And then they discover that they made it to this critical point in their walk where they needed to walk over this hill, this mountain. They had to walk over it, but a storm was coming. And what they did is they decided to go halfway up this mountain, something that walkers would never do. You either go over the top, or you stay down low and you go in like, the tree line or something. And they went right to the middle of this mountain, which went against all of their training. You don't do that. And their last entry was, we're going to make camp in this like totally precarious spot. And then there's no more writing. And then as they're looking at their campsite, they discovered that their tents had been basically cut open from the inside. Now, I don't know how you figure that out, but apparently they were cut open from the inside. And all of their clothes had been neatly folded and left inside of their tent. And then they found there was a couple of shoes that were left inside of the tent. There's 9 hikers, and they found 9 sets of footprints, some with shoes, some without, walking down the hill down to this forest. And so they follow these footsteps down to the forest, and they find there's these two guys that are only wearing underwear that are huddled around this little tiny fire, and they're both frozen to death. And then they find next to them, there is a tree that there's no way you could have climbed this tree. There's no low hanging branches, but there was all these scratch marks and claw marks that were clearly human, like fingernails all over it, that they had desperately tried to climb this tree and then hadn't made it up the tree. And then they fell to the ground or something, they're gone. And then the footprints continued back up the hill, but away from the campsite. And they find 3 more people, one of which has this devastating chest wound that it looked like her whole chest had been caved in completely. And then the others were wearing clothes of the other people. Like the limited clothes they had on were from other people, and their clothes had traces of radiation on them. And then they couldn't find the other 4 hikers. And then like months later, when it froze, when it all unthawed, they found the 4 other hikers, or whatever, 3 or 4 other hikers over in this den. It looked like almost like an animal's den. And they were also just devastated, like chest injury, head injury. And they all had different pieces of clothing on. And one person had their lips cut off, ears cut off, nose cut off. And they had their chest injury was incredibly severe, but they had no outside trauma. And in this area, there had literally never been an avalanche. In the history of this area, there had never been an avalanche. While they were there was no bad weather. There's not people anywhere near them. And they're all covered in radiation and devastated with these injuries. And so the Soviet government began investigating this case. And they have this incredible line that now I'm going to butcher, but you can find it for yourself. It's like their cause of death, because I couldn't figure it out. What happened to them was a compelling, unnatural force they were unable to overcome. Like that was what they ruled. And they're like, sorry, family, they couldn't overcome some compelling, unnatural force. That's what happened to them. And so it was this huge mystery. And then as it happens, after I did this post that went viral on TikTok, they solved it. And it turned out there was an ice slab that had come down and devastated one. And they had tried to like go rescue the others. They got hypothermia, began taking their clothes off, which happens when you're hypothermic. And the traces of radiation was from something totally separate that had already been on their clothes. So it wasn't a big mystery. But before it was solved, it was like this really weird thing.
So the chest trauma is an ice slab that then melts and leaves no.
There you go.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah,
it's like Encyclopedia Brown shit, man.
There you go. And so I posted that on TikTok. It was like the 60-second version of it.
Yeah.
But like it went like mega viral, like 10 million views in like 24 hours. It was like this huge hit. And TikTok's a new platform, and I didn't really know what this meant for me. But I was like, you know what? It feels so fucking good to put a post online that has nothing to do with my military experience, that I want to do it again purely from like a dopamine perspective. Like that felt really good. To do something that I don't feel like shameful about. And I began like immediately. It was like I had found the thing that I wanted to do that was going to replace the Navy SEAL thing. And I began like researching these unsolved mysteries. There's a whole, I could rattle off like 50 of these things. And there's all these incredible cases, and I love telling stories. I've been talking nonstop since I got on here. I love talking. And I just completely shifted my social media presence to being about unsolved, strange mysteries, true crime, that kind of thing. And it really took off. And I built my TikTok up to, it's at 7.2 million followers. I'm like verified 7.2 million followers, this platform. I'm like one of the biggest creators on this platform. And I'm like, how did this happen? I'm just telling stories, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And so because there's realistically, it's hard to make a living on TikTok. There is creators do get paid for their views, but it's pennies on the dollar because it's a new platform.
Sure.
And so I transitioned to YouTube because I really wanted to make a career out of it. And YouTube has a very traditional style of paying if you create good content. And it started working well for me.
Just to pause for a second, you're not a guy who's like some tech genius. You're not an influencer at this point. You've gotten a little bit of experience. You understand the power of social media from having used social media to help get a name for Elite Meat. But at this point, you're not like a YouTube star, and you're not somebody. You're like, I'm gonna make a living on YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. And like the way I grew TikTok was I decided that I had the literally most insane lifestyle for like a few months. I posted 3 videos every single day, which requires for each video like 6 to 8 hours. So I was doing like 20 to 22 hours of work, sleeping for 2 to 4 hours, and then doing it all over again, day after day after day after day. Because the quarantine started and there was nothing else going on. And so I literally like I went into this room, this like shitty room in my house. It's like a den, and I just created content nonstop until my page had grown big enough. And then I did the same thing on YouTube. I literally spend like 18 hours a day creating content for YouTube. So it's definitely like the blunt force approach that I'm not going to try to perfect the things I'm doing. I'm going to rely on the idea that I'm a good enough storyteller with a compelling enough content to talk about that everything else can be kind of shoddy and it will get better over time. But I'm going to just completely flood my page with content all the time. And I'll get better by doing like repetitions. Yeah. And so now I'm at a place finally where like I actually kind of know what I'm doing. And my page is doing quite well on YouTube. It's at 800,000 subscribers now. But that's I've really only been doing it since June 1st. And so it's from June 1st to now. And I expect to hit 1 million in a couple months. And yeah, this is what I'm doing now. It's been wild.
And this is your full-time gig.
This is, yeah.
That's it. That's a wild story. But the lesson there is that anybody who just simply posts a lot will get a million followers. Is that did I accurately capture that?
I think that
you heard it first here, kids.
I tell my wife because she admittedly was not a believer when I'm posting on a child's social media platform about like mysteries. You know, she's like, I don't know how this is going to parlay into a career for you.
You're like, trust me, this is what I'm going to do. I know we have kids and mouths to feed and we have a mortgage, but you got to trust me on this.
There were some days where I'm like, I'm a joke. But honestly, I think that if you need to find something that there's interest in, which that's the hard part. You need to have something compelling enough from a content perspective that there's a spark that someone's interested. It can be anywhere. If you post something that does way better than everything else, you should analyze what went well and try to replicate it. And I started doing that, but I was fortunate enough that I had like man, I'm tired of doing this SEAL stuff. Here, I'll do one post on TikTok, 10 million views. You know what I mean? So I kind of had like this massive spark that showed me there's a market for this. So I had a great starting point. So when I went all in and was doing all this content, I already knew it worked. I just needed to get better at it and be consistent about it. So there's a luck element to this. But like once you have your moment online on social media, because everybody at some point, if you post enough content, you're going to have one or two things that do better than everything else. So it's all relative. Once you figure out the thing that does well, you have to just completely send it on that one thing and stop trying to do the things that aren't working and just do the things that are. And for me, I had that moment and I decided I am going to like literally put all of my energy and focus into this. Like I'm going to outwork the fucking world on my YouTube page. And that's what I've been doing nonstop. Like that's all I do. After this, I'm going to spend the next 20 hours on a video, like guaranteed, because I'm just going to outwork anybody else making a YouTube page.
And you're right. Surely there is a little bit of luck, right? But I think that's, there's social media influencers out there right now listening to this that are like, oh man, I've been trying for years to try and build my follower, and it's because they're putting just whatever garbage out there that garbage that gets garbage views. And I think there's yes, a little bit of luck to it, but there's two things that you mentioned that I think that really speak to that entrepreneur in you. And it's one, the ability to be self-critical and be like, I don't want to just be John Allen, the former Navy SEAL. I want to be something else, right? And doing that analysis of, all right, let me put something out there, and then being able to analyze what worked about it, not just go, oh well, let me just try and replicate this again. You go, no, let me dissect this and figure out what are the components that actually worked about it. And so it's that ability to be self-critical. And then the other thing is the ability to be hyper-focused and to put all your energy into it. I don't know that other people, and again, that's part of probably what made you a team guy and what made you successful with Elite Meet is that ability to go, all right, now I've analyzed what part of that was successful. Now nobody's going to outwork me on this, and I'm going to come hell or high water, I'm going to be successful because I just don't know how to fail, right? Or I do know how to fail, but I'm going to make sure that I don't fail. And I think there's a really cool lesson in there for entrepreneurs and other people who go, well, why aren't I successful? Have you done what John Allen has done, which is to put everything you've got into it and commit to it and overcome obstacles through the quarantine, through the pandemic, to continue to hammer the shit out of this this singular goal. I think that's a really cool part of that story, bro.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's my story. It's still being written, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. It is a fascinating look, and I was following you on YouTube, and of course, we've been friends for a long time, but I hadn't looked, with the pandemic and everything, I hadn't looked, and I go back on, and it was like 760,000, subscribers, and I told my wife, I was like, it's not views, these are subscribers, people who went, yeah, I want more of this guy's content every time he posts, and I was like, I swear I looked on his page back in June or May or something, and was like, oh, John's doing something new, and it was like through the just blink of an eye. And it's a testament to that ability, like you said, man, to put everything you've got into it, and that is a really cool story. I'm glad we had a chance to be able to pull the curtain back behind Mr. B. Allen on social media and shed a little light on who the guy is that's putting out these wild mystery stories.
Well, thanks for having me on, man.
Hey, so where can guys find you and gals? Where can folks find you on the interweb?
So you can find me on YouTube. So my channel is Mr. B. Allen. People call me Mr. Ballin, but it is Mr. B. Allen. You're probably one of the few people that know that. So Mr. B. Allen, and then also on social media or Instagram, I'm John Ballin 416, and on TikTok, I'm Mr. Ballin. And really, those are the three big ones. So Mr. Ballin on YouTube, Mr. Ballin on TikTok, and John Ballin 416 on Instagram.
And I know you just left the position as CEO and left the reins to a new CEO at Elite Meat, and I believe it's elitemeatus.org, right?
That's just so if you want to check out the charity, if you're a hiring employer or if you're a veteran that wants to get involved, go to elitemeatus.org. So elitemeatus.org, and that brings them to the website. There's an application for veterans. And for employers, it's all there. Our new CEO came in and immediately made a much better website. Mine was a piece of crap.
Humility, another great quality, but that's for another time. Hey, John, thanks so much for spending some time with us, and thanks for sharing the story, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Greencastle Podcast. Please be sure to give us a like, a thumbs up, a share. You can find us at greencastleconsulting.com/podcast. or on all the major podcast channels and the social media channels, including our YouTube channel. Thanks very much. We'll see you on the next episode.